What is going on, guys? Matt Downs with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports here to give you the edge for this 12-9 NBA 3-game slate on DraftKings. Cannot wait to break it down. We now go from a 13 NBA game slate to a 3-game, so pretty underwhelming to say the least, but there are some good plays here. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these players did end up getting ruled out because we know that Philly's playing on a back-to-back. Same thing with Denver, so like Jokic maybe. I'm just wishing because there's not too much injury news here to really impact the slate. But let's go ahead and start out here with the first couple games. We're going to be going game by game and team by team just because, again, covering every single play here on the slate is something that you guys do enjoy, looking at the ownership together. And again, provided by Fantasy Cruncher. We are also partnered with Fantasy Cruncher. So if you guys want to sign up for one of our memberships, we have a Fantasy Cruncher partner membership where if you sign up for $30, you get a $20 voucher to any Fantasy Cruncher product just to try it out. Keep in mind, the NBA monthly membership is only $20, so you guys can sign up for a membership, get the additional favorite plays that we have, my core, TJ's core, our favorite GPP plays, best leverage spots, and then also get to try out Fantasy Cruncher for pretty much free. And if you guys like the membership, you guys can continue on, and you also get that credit applied every single month going forward. So one of the many benefits you guys get to be a part here of DG Fantasy. But let's go ahead and focus on this first game here between the Utah Jazz and 76ers here with Royce O'Neal projected the highest owned here from this roster, just fitting a ton of builds here, the 4.3K price tag. Keep in mind these guys are not missing anybody that's noteworthy. Royce O'Neal has been playing consistent minutes ever since he's been back on the rosters here after suffering some injuries here at the beginning of the season. They also dropped 136 points last night versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a late addition here to the injury report from any one of these teams playing on a back-to-back, this being one of the teams. Royce O'Neal is just a very safe play. He's not the best fantasy point per minute player historically. He is averaging 0.73 fantasy points here on the season with current injuries. 23.8% just fits a lot of builds, comes up to a 5.6 point per dollar value, which is actually the best here on this roster. Rudy Gobert also showing a decent amount of ownership, 8.4K, 19.1 on the 3-game slate isn't really the highest. He is considered a nice pivot spot here at the center position because in terms of ownership, he's actually 4th on the pecking order at the center position. Again, pretty neutral on all these players. Consider him a decent pivot spot, but one guy I do want to talk about here is going to be Donovan Mitchell. If he does start and play, 8.8K price tag, he's covered that price point every single game dating back five games. And he's showing lower ownership. So at the shooting guard, point guard position, I actually do consider him a decent GPP pivot. A lot of the other games will be taking a lot of the ownership. So this is a great pivot here at the shooting guard, point guard position. And then the follow-up here, Jordan Clarkson at 4.9K, Bogdanovich at 5.8. Really not too much interest there. They are shooters, so obviously if they get hot, this is a higher paced game, then they could pay off their price tag, but really no interest outside of larger GPPs. Switching over to the 76ers, these guys are showing a little bit more ownership just because of their price points. They're a little bit easier to get to. And Joel Embiid, 11K. Doesn't have the best matchup. I really don't get this price point here. There's really no injuries that really concern these guys. Ben Simmons has been out here, obviously, the majority of the year. So Danny Green, 21.1% owned just because of that price point, 3.3K. He's not a starter usually, only playing 25 minutes off the bench. I really don't get that ownership. He's definitely more of a GPP option in my opinion. Same thing with Joel Embiid for the reasons I said, not the best matchup there versus Rudy Gobert. And then also Tobias Harris here at 7.6K is probably my favorite option from this roster just because of the minute upside there alongside Seth Curry. Seth Curry is more of a shooter, so we obviously are going to be a little bit more off of him. But Tobias Harris does string along some good games once he does play over 34 minutes. Last game was a little bit of a dud there. But there's really not too much to choose from this roster. I think that Tobias Harris is probably my favorite GPP option here on this team. Tyrese Maxey, another guy that does continue to see minutes. Obviously not benefiting from any injuries whatsoever. Only played 26 minutes last night. And he is dealing with an illness as of right now. So we don't know if he's going to see extended run. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him sit. So if there is any pending injury news or slate-breaking injury news, I will pin a post in the YouTube comment section below with my updated favorite plays. Switching over to the Lakers versus Memphis, again, not too much interest here. These guys are always carrying under the radar ownership, talking about Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and Russell Westbrook, because you never know who's going to step up. They all have a ton of usage. The price tags are continuing to come down, which is something we love to see. So if any one of these three guys are ruled out, it looks like they are probable to play tonight, then I'll have a lot more interest, but really no interest overall whatsoever in this entire roster. Switching over to the chalk team, finally we're seeing some ownership and some more obvious plays and some guys that I'm going to be locking in here. Dillon Brooks, since coming back from his injury, hasn't really seen too many minutes, but the last 2 games, it looks like they're finally letting a longer leash here on Dillon Brooks. Has played 36 minutes in 33 back-to-back games. He didn't have the best game last game, but they only scored 96 points. They're expected to score 110 points here versus the Lakers, the highest pace team in the NBA as of right now. Assuming he does play 34 plus minutes, we have him projected at 37.45 points and a 6.04 point per dollar value, again, without Ja Morant and Morrell. Kyle Anderson, Brandon Clark, and Williams are all questionable. So if any one of those guys are ruled out, then I'll obviously have a lot more interest here in this overall picture here from the Memphis Grizzlies. But as of right now, Dillon Brooks is going to be considered a cash lock and an overall core play. I'm going to be locking him in because regardless of who's ruled out, he will see about 30 plus minutes and a very affordable price tag there, averaging a decent 1.11 fantasy points per minute here without Ja Morant on the floor. Tyus Jones, you can say in the exact same reasons I just said there for Dillon Brooks. Also projected about 34 plus minutes and has been seeing consistent minutes here since being announced a starter in this rotation without Ja Morant on the floor. He doesn't shoot the most, but he's also a lot more involved in terms of assists and rebounds, and he pretty much does it all. He's also the second highest owned, third highest owned on the slate here, and a pretty safe option just because of the minute upside. I do like him here at a 6K price tag. I think that's both him and Dillon Brooks are very affordable in that 6K range. And I think that he's also going to be a lock here for my lineup. Switching down to Jaren Jackson, he's definitely not a lock. He's going to be very volatile and also has a bad matchup. I'm assuming he's going to be matched up against either AD or LeBron. So we know that Jaren Jackson has a history with getting in foul trouble at a 7K price tag. I definitely think his night is going to be dependent on whether he can stay out of foul trouble or not. He was in foul trouble again last game at five fouls, but he did end up with 41 points. So Jaren Jackson, not my favorite option on the slate. If you happen to land on him as the last piece, definitely don't mind it because he does get a usage bump and fantasy point per minute boost here without Ja Morant, obviously. And to get down to some of these these mid-range value plays here, Anthony Melton, 26.5% ownership, and with there being a lack of value options on the slate, he's actually showing a decent amount of ownership. He's only projected right now about 26 minutes, but he's a very good fantasy point per minute player here without Ja Morant, averaging 1.11 fantasy points per minute, which is actually higher than Dillon Brooks. He is a very good, effective player once he sees minutes. So that's my main concern with Melton is if Kyle Anderson does play, then obviously the minute upside's not going to be there. But as long as he sees about 24-ish plus minutes, then yeah, I like the upside here, especially that 4.6K price tag. Steven Adams, a guy that's been playing consistent minutes, and one guy that we will definitely see in this matchup here versus the Lakers because they're going to need him. So a good defensive player, 5.1K, and historically, fantasy point per minute wise, he's averaging over a fantasy point per minute. As long as he sees minutes, I love the upside there at the center position and a great pivot spot. He never carries ownership. 25.5% owned right now. Definitely don't mind that as the last piece, especially if you are landing on him in cash. And then we have to talk about a great GPP play out of Desmond Bane, just another guy that sees consistent minutes. Right now, he's projected for 35. I don't think he quite sees 35 minutes if Kyle Anderson does play. If he doesn't, then yeah, I could definitely see that. But he only played 34 last game, so I expect him to play around those minutes. Fantasy point per minute wise, not the greatest, not the worst. So at a 6.9K price tag with him being priced up, I definitely think he's going to be carrying a little bit lower ownership. And last but not least, we do have the Denver Nuggets versus my San Antonio Spurs. Spurs are actually favored by 2 points. I don't know if they know that Jokic is not going to play or something, because right now Jokic is expected to play, and I do think that the Denver Nuggets are overall the better team. No bias there, obviously. Jokic obviously has the ability to break any slate wide open, scored 72 points last night. I did say I'm willing to fade him because I don't think he dropped 70 plus points, and he did exactly that. I think this is another matchup where he could just go out and dominate against Jakob Poeltl. So showing 26.7% ownership, he's my favorite spend up option if you happen to land on him. I definitely think he's by far the best option here on the slate in terms of sheer upside. I'm not going to be locking him in, but right now I think he makes for a great build. I'll show you why here in a second. Will Barton came down in price tag. All the rest of these guys are just going to be GPP options because there are more obvious plays at their price points on the slate. The Denver Nuggets are obviously not benefiting without any injuries here. Jamal Murray's been out for a while, so the price tags have adjusted to reflect that news. Then last but not least, we do have the San Antonio Spurs, and this is where my last two locks will come in because they are without Keldon Johnson and also Devin Vassell. Vassell out playing with the second unit, but Keldon Johnson is normally their starting power forward, playing about 30 to 34 minutes every single night. So Lonnie Walker does get a minute boost. He's projected 25 minutes, whereas he's used to seeing about 18 to 20 minutes. Therefore, making him one of the more obvious value plays here on the entire slate because his price tag is at a 3.7K price tag, historically about a 0.8 fantasy point per minute player, so definitely not that bad. And with there just being a lack of value options and also shooting guard options, there's like no shooting guards to choose from. I think that Lonnie Walker is one of the most obvious plays on the entire slate in terms of lineup construction as well. Derek White showing 32% ownership. I definitely don't mind him as a 6.3K option, but again, I do lean on the Memphis Grizzlies if you're looking for that 6K range. DeJounte Murray, 9.7K, averaging 1.15 fantasy points per minute with these current injuries off the court. Doesn't make as much sense there. I'm going to be going to a guy like Jokic in a way better matchup. Obviously, going to be dominant there. Should be against Jakob Poeltl, who we're going to talk about next. They're going to need Jakob Poeltl at a 6.4K price tag. I do think he's going to get dominated, but he still has to play. As long as he stays out of foul trouble, has been playing consistent starter minutes, making him one of the obvious center options on the slate. As you can see here, very, very consistent. I see his floor being at 29, even in the bad matchup. So that's one of my favorite options on the slate. And if we look at the slate as a whole, I have 4 locks. We have Dillon Brooks, Lonnie Walker, Tyus Jones, and Jakob Poeltl. So let's go ahead and do some lineup building with that. Take away the 150 lineups I built yesterday, and we'll go ahead and crunch this by my projections. Hit the minimum to 49,800. See what kind of lineups we pop out here. So building one single lineup using those locks that I did suggest. EHT ended up in there. That's interesting. Jaren Jackson, Steven Adams, and LeBron James is the last piece. Let's go ahead and lock in Jokic and see what that gives me, because I do think that Jokic is going to end up in my cash build if I had to. Based on my projections, we come up with Royce O'Neal, Melton, and Jaren Jackson. I love that build a lot more. That would be one of my favorite overall builds. That's definitely a GPP type lineup. And if we crunch here by ownership projections, by the way, these are all uploaded via Fantasy Cruncher. We come out with the same build. So as of right now, that would be a good build to have here for this contest, for cash games, that is, or a smaller GPP. But that will go ahead and wrap up my breakdown, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy this breakdown. If you did, please do hit that subscription button, notification bell, and of course smash that like button for all of our future NBA content. With all that being said, have a great rest of your day, and let's cash.